So I'm throwing out a little bonus video this week. I've had a number of people from time to time in classes and different places tying flies have asked me about adding weight to flies. In particular, recently somebody asked about adding weight to the woolly buggers. There's a number of things to consider when you're going to add weight to a fly, and so I decided just to quickly do another woolly bugger. This is a weighted version of the woolly bugger. Now, you can't really tell the difference between this one and any of the others that I've done in some of the recent videos. Obviously, if you're using a bead like this, or even a cone like this one right here, you can tell that it's weighted. But this one you can't, because it has some lead wraps on the body. As I said, there's a number of considerations when you're going to add weight to a fly. The primary being that adding weight to the fly is going to change the behavior of the fly in the water. Now, it may change it in a way that you want it to behave, that the fish find more attractive, or it may hinder it. Something to consider. But this is a weighted woolly bugger. I'll get started. I'm going to start this weighted woolly bugger with my hook on the vise. This is a Mustad 9672 in a size 6, a little bit longer. You can do these on a 71 if you want, which I've done in some other videos. One thing to point out, there's a couple of different ways that you can weight your flies. And that's part of the reason why I had chosen this for the 9672. You can put some lead wraps on this, which I'm going to put. This is 0.03 lead-free wire. But you can also put cones and beads on the ends of these. Now, if you're going to put a cone or a bead on the end of these, there's one consideration you have. The overall length of the body on the fly is going to be reduced because of that bead or that cone. So if you're tying on a 9671, then your body's going to be shorter because the bead and cone is taking up some space. Move up to a longer shanked hook like the 9672, and then your body will end up still being the same length that you're looking for. Something to consider. I'll talk a little bit more on the cones and beads and the different weights in just a moment. But I'll go ahead and debarb this hook. And I'm going to first attach the wire. And I'm going to put maybe 10 or 12 wraps of this wire on. Keep in mind that you can control the sink rate of the fly by the weight of the wire, the diameter and the weight of the wire, as well as how many wraps of the wire you put on here. So if I want this to sink a little bit faster, then I could put, say, 15 or 20 wraps of lead on there. That's up to you. If I only want it to sink just a little bit, then I might use fewer wraps, or I might go to, say, a 0.01 or 0.015 lead diameter, something that's a little bit less. Now, two things to consider here. One, I'm using a lead-free wire. If you're using lead, old-timers will tell you that you need to encapsulate the wire with some thread and a little bit of head cement. Assuming that this fly you're tying, you're going to fish it, it's going to get wet numerous times. It's going to be put back in your fly box because it's one of the lucky ones that doesn't get hung up in a tree. And so you have it in your box for a number of years. The lead, if that's what you're using on here, the lead will actually oxidize and it will flake off into the fly to the point where it looks like it has a little bit of dandruff. So keep that in mind. I use the lead-free simply because it works for me. It's not an issue of the toxicity of it or anything like that. And I don't mind that it isn't quite as heavy, specific gravity wise, I suppose, as a lead wire. The other thing to consider is the position of your lead. Anytime you put weight on a fly, by the way, you're going to change the characteristics of that fly and how it moves in the water. So that's something else you have to keep in mind. If I have this weight all the way up towards the front, like say with a bead or a cone, that's going to give the fly a little bit more of a jigging action because that weight is right up front. When you ease up on it and it's not, swimming in the current real fast, it's going to want to dive down. If I put this weight towards the back this way, then it's going to want to ride more in the back like this and even sink down in this profile. So keep that in mind. You can also put it right in the middle. If you're looking for it to still swim more horizontally, but just sink horizontal, then the middle is probably where you want it. But you will change the characteristics of the fly and how it behaves in the water. So some people will tell you you're better off put a one or two little split shots up on your tippet, maybe 4 to 6 inches up above the fly. So then the fly is still swimming natural in the water and it looks more natural, but it's getting down where you want it to be. For thread, I'm using a UTC 140 Denier in olive. I'm going to attach my thread right behind the eye of the hook a little bit here and wind down to where I just get to those lead wraps. Now here I'm going to ease up on the tension on my tag, and I'm going to reach back here and notice that when I just put some tension with my bobbin here and pushed, it actually pushed that lead backwards. If I start wrapping right up against that lead, see what it's doing? It's just starting to push it backwards. What I want to do is I want to get right up to it, ease up here, all my tension, and reach back behind, and then start wrapping in, and that's going to catch that lead right behind, or the thread right behind the lead wraps, and keep it from getting pushed down the hook shank. Now I'm going to put a little bit of a thread dam in front and behind of the lead wraps. That is for two different reasons. It's going to give me a nice smooth transition for materials. I don't end up with a little bit of a ledge, and then it also is going to keep it from sliding around on the hook shank. Then I'm going to leave my thread just maybe halfway between the point and the barb. And this is where I mentioned if you're using lead wraps, you'll want to finish encapsulating that in some thread and put some head cement on that. It just encases it, helps to prevent your flies from looking like they've got dandruff. Now we're going to finish the woolly bugger basically in the same method that I've already shown. I'm going to tie in my Marabou. One thing I'm not going to do on this is I'm not going to advance my thread over the Marabou all the way up the hook shank because I have that lead that's going to increase the diameter of the body. So I don't need to use the rest of that Marabou feather to kind of bulk up the underbody a little bit. Now this works the same for the bead and the cone. You would put your bead or your cone on first, and then you would attach your Marabou, your Hackle, your Chenille, and then apply those. So for Hackle, I'm using the same Grizzly olive, dyed olive, whiting bugger pack. Nice long Rooster saddle here. I tie this in right there at the base of the tail. Woolly buggers are great flies for beginners because you can be kind of sloppy with them and they're very forgiving, and they still look very, very good. I've got the same olive chenille. I think this is a lighter olive than the one I had in the other videos. Attach that in, tying it right down the base of the tail. Now I'm going to advance my thread forward to maybe about half an eye length. Taking my hackle pliers, I'm going to grab that chenille. I'm going to twist that chenille up a little bit so that it doesn't have any flat spots. I'll wrap forward the body. If you are putting a bead or a cone on here, your thread would be right behind that bead or cone right now. You're going to wrap the chenille all the way up to right up, not tight up against the bead or the cone, but pretty much right up to it, because you want the body materials to kind of push on that bead and cone, anchoring it down to behind the eye of the hook. Here I'm leaving a little bit of space for the head, but you don't have to when you're using a bead or a cone. One wrap at the back here. Notice I'm not using a wire on this particular version. You don't have to. I often don't use a wire. When I do, I prefer to tie the hackle up front and use that wire from the rear like I did in the other videos. But I just don't, because these are so quick and easy to tie that I don't really feel I have to make them bulletproof. Like I have in the other flies, I'm going to put in 3 or 4 extra wraps of that hackle right up front here to give me a little bit broader face, help to make a little bit more noise in the water and not lay all those hackles back. Once I get that anchored in, I'll sweep all of these back, start making the head, wrapping back on that racus just a little bit to anchor it. If you can pop this off, great. It's a little bit thick right there, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it. Now I'll smooth this area right here up a little bit, making certain everything is covered. Nice smooth head. Whip finish, head cement, and the weighted woolly bugger is done. So as you can see, this version looks just like any other woolly bugger. You wouldn't even know that the weight's under there. If you're going to have some weighted and non-weighted woolly buggers, you need to kind of have them separated in your box so you know which is which. Some people will finish the head off with a little band on it, or maybe a little bit different color. They'll have some way, maybe they'll put a little flash in it or something, or even have just a separate box, separate sides or whatever, to know that this one is weighted, whereas, these others aren't. Another little tip right there. Head cement and another woolly bugger is done. So that is a little bit of a bonus video, and we'll finish off the little mini series that I've done on tying woolly buggers. Can't stress enough how wonderful these flies are. As a tire, they're still very fun to tie, and as a beginner, they're great to just tie a mess of these up, and pretty much anywhere you're going to catch fish on these. So that's a weighted woolly bugger. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.